Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third session of Equity Matters. So today's session focuses on inclusive leadership. We have Tina Vinod, the head of diversity and inclusion at ThoughtWorks, here to throw some light on the topic. She, in fact, in 2019, she won the Trailblazer Women in Diversity Award by Women's Web and her Rising Award by Jobs for Her, for rising as a woman leader in diversity and in inclusion. So through today's session, you'll understand what led her to achieve these awards and the practices which she took up. By the way, ThoughtWorks under her leadership has been recognized as one of the most inclusive organizations. So this is a big opportunity for each one of us to understand the practices and initiatives which really worked for them, and maybe hopefully get a little inspired and build our own practices. So Tina, welcome to the third session of Equity Matters.
Yeah, thanks, Regina. That's a very humbling introduction. I do think that ThoughtWorks has influenced me personally a lot more than I have influenced ThoughtWorks. I'll talk a little more about that today.
All right, that's wonderful. So let us start. Let's deep dive right into the topic. And the first question I would like to ask you is, what's the importance of inclusive leadership in transforming the entire organizational culture?
Okay, I think to a large extent, right, and I will cite my example from ThoughtWorks. I've been with ThoughtWorks for about 18 years now, a little more than 18 years actually. And prior to that, I spent my, I had about 2 years of experience, 2.5 years of experience. And one of the things about leaders that stood out to me when I joined ThoughtWorks was the fact that there was an absolute belief that, they are part of the rest of us. And this is, I'm talking about, 18 and a half years back. And I remember the founder of ThoughtWorks, Roy Singham, walking into the office. We were very small then, but walking into the office and, putting his hands over the shoulder of a lot of us and asking us about how things are going, what's happening, introducing his family, bringing his kids over, his wife over. But more than that, I think more than anything else, I think leaders that stand out today are the ones who are, who care and talk a lot and follow the principles of servant leadership, right? Where they believe that their job is to empower people and be role models for change. And I have seen that happen, a lot in ThoughtWorks. In fact, I think I often mention this book, The Athena Doctrine, about how women and men who think like them will rule the future. This is a book by John Gershima and Michael D'Antonio, where they have surveyed about 64,000, roughly about 64,000 people from 13 different countries and nations. And 2/3 of the world feels, of the world feels that it is the feminine principles that will make the world a better place. And what better way than now to talk about it, especially in this pandemic time where countries led by women have been more decisive, been able to draw better practices and take quicker decisions in pandemic, like New Zealand, right? And these are the principles that I've seen followed in ThoughtWorks. In fact, it's non-negotiable when it comes to best practices and following the values of the organizations for leaders in ThoughtWorks. And one of the best practices that we follow is that when it comes to diversity and inclusion, leaders walk the talk. So you would see, and I will talk a little bit about some of the initiatives later on, but we have an unconscious bias training program, which is about 4 hours that has been exclusively customized by ThoughtWorks, and it is presented by the leadership team. You could be the MD of the organization, you could be someone leading technology, but you sign up to drive and talk about the stories on unconscious bias in ThoughtWorks. The stories around how we failed, the stories around some successes, the stories around how bias impacts us as a collective, and why it's important to understand our biases and go on that journey to reversing some of our unconscious biases that we have. So these are some of the things that I often talk about, right? One other thing I think which we often do is that when it comes to onboarding sessions or when it comes to talking to new people, you would see leaders talk the DNI, language. We talk about our best practices. In fact, when we hire very senior people in ThoughtWorks, and we are interviewing for senior roles, you would have someone like a grad go interview them, right? Someone who's just joined us in the last 1 year, to just see how that person is responding to the grad, right? And are they responding to that person with respect? Are they looking at the other panelists and not responding to the grad's questions, or not? Sometimes it's just simple things like body language. It's some simple things like how do you respond with respect and empathy. These things are the ones that matter. Our LD program is very in tuned to DNI, and leaders are expected to learn a lot more about some of the best practices that are there in the industry. And we have a section in ThoughtWorks called the Social Change Group. We talk about how the impact of technology, how we can champion diversity and inclusion. And I'm not talking just from the employer brand perspective, but beyond that as well, right? How do we include marginalized communities in ThoughtWorks, and how do we support other initiatives externally? How do we participate with movements? And all of this is something that we often talk about. Yes.
All right. Interesting that you brought up New Zealand, and women leadership has gained a little bit of recognition because of that. Interestingly enough, you yourself are hailed as a trailblazer in the DNI space. So we would be very happy to hear your journey so far, enabling inclusions.
Yeah, and I often talk about this, right? A person has so many multiple identities that they bring to the workplace. You see me today, and recently I was about a couple of months back before the lockdown. I presented, and I spoke to someone, to a group of people in Periphery. Periphery is an organization that works with transgenders and enables and empowers them. And they do a lot of training programs, after which corporates hire them. And I was, as part of the ThoughtWorks DNI team, I went and presented to the group, and I said, so look at me, I'm standing in front of you. What do you think about me? And there were a lot of things that came up, right? Okay, you speak English very well. You are from a senior position. You probably studied abroad. All of these things. And I said, you probably come from a very well-to-do family, things like that. And they said, you're very smart, you're very confident. And I said, I didn't start with being confident. I didn't start looking like this. I wasn't like this, because I remember when I started my career, right, I would really shy away from even talking about myself in a performance review. And there were so many things, right? Your personal experiences. It's just me and my sister. My dad passed away when we were 10, and it was then me, my sister, and my mom. And those experiences of being just women in the family, right, in an extremely patriarchal world, right? And I'm talking about years back, decades back. And growing up and looking at the nuances that come in, right? Do girls need to be educated? Why is computers necessary for you, for girl children? Why don't you save up for their marriage? The typical Indian patriarchal society that we've had to deal with. And I've seen extremely strong role models of women when I grew up, right? Women who fought all odds, who've been single mothers, who've being amazing, strong women. And all of these reflect who I am today. And these are identities that we carry. I look at someone and I can just say, hey, that's a guy. But that could be a person, who's going through a mental health issue. It could be someone who could, possibly be from the LGBTQ plus community, who has seen a lot of discrimination, or face a lot of issues in their life. So I often talk about how, there are multiple identities that we bring to the workplace, and these identities need to be acknowledged and recognized. And I think I've had the privilege of working in an organization that recognizes that. Often people talk about how ThoughtWorks focuses on diversity and inclusion and building a culture of belonging. And I often get asked, what's the secret sauce? What makes this culture works? What makes people stay committed to the organizational goals? And for many of us, right, even in ThoughtWorks, it's very difficult to dissect this culture, and it varies person to person, office to office. And diversity and inclusion wasn't even a sort of a HR prerogative or a people initiative in ThoughtWorks. It was something that was there, that was inbuilt into the organizational culture and DNA. It's only in the last 5 years, as we grew beyond a certain size, we said, hey, we need to focus on this. And that's when I played 6 different roles in ThoughtWorks before I moved to the DNI role. And I think it's just seemed very natural for me to take on the lead role and do this. But I can tell you that my experiences come from working with some of the best leaders, learning from some of the most difficult situations, and building policies that work best for different people, right? You would never see, when we talk about policies in ThoughtWorks, you would never see us saying we will not, we'll only work within this frame. You would see us customizing. You would see us listening to our people. In fact, last to last year, we had a maternity leave policy, and there was one thought worker who was adopting, and our adoption leave policy was only 3 months, whereas our maternity leave policy was 6 months. And she walked up to me and said, what makes me different as a mother than a biological mother? Why do I not need 6 months? And that just sort of woke us up. And in a fraction of 2 weeks, we changed the entire policy for ThoughtWorks India. And like this, there are multiple policies, right? Gender affirmation and transition in the workplace policy. Very few, this is specifically for trans people. And we have worked with right from our people team to external organizations on counseling for trans people, to talking about internal best practices on how we will ensure people will be supportive to trans people when they're going to transition, as well as a Mediclaim policy and support that we require, our leave policy. All of this, and I think a concoction of all of this framed that entire policy. So it's very important, I think, for us to understand that we are not in silos. We come with multiple identities, and these identities we bring to the workplace, and a workplace that helps us express our true selves is the one that will create a sense of belonging for us. I often talk about, every employee being a custodian of their organizational culture. You are a custodian of your organizational culture. And if that responsibility lies only with your people team, only with your HR team, only with your leadership team, then you have failed as an organization. And I often cite this and talk about this very strongly to every thought worker who joins us and is part of our onboarding, conversations. One other thing that we do is that we have something called the social change interview process. So as part of the interview process, there is one, interview that's called the social change interview. And there are people who will talk to the candidate and talk about some of the things that matter most to us as a business when it comes to organizational culture, when it comes to building a culture of inclusion, when it comes to equality, equity, and diversity and inclusion practices, when it talks about some of the work that we do in the technology front that matters, right? And all of this is something that we share. And a lot of times we tell people, if this is not the organization for you, please don't join us, because this is what we care about, right? If you tell me, if a candidate tells me, I'm uncomfortable working with a trans person in my team, I don't know how to react to that. Or I'm not comfortable having conversations on caste in the workplace, I think there is a problem there then, right? As an adult, if you don't realize that we carry multiple identities, you have a challenge working with different people in a diverse, organization, there is a problem there. And hence, these are some of the practices that are inbuilt into the system itself that hopefully, and it's not like we don't make mistakes, of course we do. And it's not like, we aren't learning. Like I always said, inclusion is a journey and never a state. And so, but some of these practices have helped us improvise.
All right. Thank you for sharing your journey, and also ThoughtWorks giving us a little glimpse into your day-to-day life and how you enable inclusions. Coming to the next question, how do you build organization-specific inclusive strategies?
Mm, mm. I think when you have inclusion inbuilt into your system, right? And when you say, like, for example, a lot of organizations have practices where or targets or affirmative actions or ERGs. That means you care about it and you need to show you care. A lot of times, people question the fact that how can you have targets? You have targets because you have an unfair representation of people in the workplace, and it is important to have targets. And targets is not the problem really. The problem is when you fail to communicate why you have targets and why it's important to have that representation in your workplace to your employees first. A lot of times you see organizations talk about, DNI and your targets and best practices outside in conferences on their website, but many times they fail to make their own employees understand why this is important. And I think that is something that we have learned in the long run, that we need to share our practices internally. We need to talk about it more internally than we do externally. We need to engage with dissent, right? When someone comes and questions us and says, why do you have a 40% women in tech target, right? I need to be able to say why. I need to say we want to be representative of the world that we are in, right? The world is not only men. The world is not only people from a certain community or people from a certain class or caste or religion. And it is difficult. I mean, it is difficult thing to follow, but it is important. And hence we have these difficult conversations internally. We have these study groups internally. We talk about these things internally. Um, but inclusive practices also means touching upon four critical areas. And one is, finding diverse talent. It is very, very important that you invest in finding diverse talent. And it doesn't need to be a whole load of things, right? Like you can say, I want to focus on this as a business. And this is important to me, but you need to have it. And the next thing is that you need to have inclusion and belonging inbuilt into your practices, right? How safe is your gender inclusion policies, your anti-sexual harassment policies? How aware are people of your, prevention of sexual harassment policy? Is it only for women? Because that's what the Indian legal system says, right? Is it extended and is it gender neutral? Do people from your LGBTQ plus community feel safe? Do you have affinity groups within your organization? What do you do for advancement? How do you ensure equal opportunities? How do you ensure pay parity? In fact, recently our head of HR, our people had spoke about how, there's the global team that does this pay parity check, that also checks India's pay parity. And in fact, for certain roles, we're leaning more towards women having a higher pay than men. And he said it's a good problem to have, but we need to ensure that we are not discriminating either ways. And so these are things that people need to know. In fact, when Kaushik shared this with me, our head of people, I said I'm not surprised, because we have a women at ThoughtWorks affinity group, and when he shared this, I said not a single woman has spoken about a problem with pay parity in ThoughtWorks. Not a single woman. I mean, of course, we talk about a lot of things, right? We talk about flexibility. We talk about how client work is demanding, how opportunities could be better. We should have more representation at the leadership level. All of this, but these are some of the things that I think are important. It's also important that your policies are reflective of the organization that you are in, and learn from external organizations. You are not the best. You'll never be the best, because DNI is a space where there will always be someone who's doing much more than you. So it's important to keep tab of what other organizations are doing, what are the best practices, what are the policies, and never have stringent policies. They should be customizable, right? When you say this is the budget or this is what we offer, please go beyond that as well. We have a carpooling policy, and we say that three people need to pool and all of that. And then there's one of our trans employees came back and said, Tina, it's a real big challenge. I live really in the outskirts of Bangalore, because that's my safe space. I've built a community there, and that's my safe space. So I'll be taking Uber, right? And I'll do carpooling with Uber. So I want that to be included in the policy. And yes, that matters. It can be just one person. It can just be 3 people in the organization, but that matters. So I think these are things that are important. And talk about it. Talk about it in your brand. Talk about it in your internally. Talk about it in your conferences. People need to know that you care. And I think people talk about diversity, inclusion. We often say that diversity is non-negotiable. Even if you don't care about diversity, you will still have diversity in your organization. Inclusion is a capability. You will need to build that capability internally. You will need to train people. You will need to create awareness. You will need to build awareness around, for example, sensitize people on LGBTQ plus inclusion. This is not something culturally we are taught and we learn, right? That is something even very, very senior people sometimes say, hey, I probably need to sit through a sensitization session on LGBTQ plus inclusion. What are pronouns, so we celebrate these days internally, globally as well, like the upcoming pronoun day or the mental health wellness day, or the LGBTQ plus, June as the Pride Month. All of this, and I think learning as a community becomes important. And we have specific leadership development programs. In fact, one of the things that we do is globally, we say at a minimum 50% representation of any global leadership development program have to be women, and an intersectionality of leaders, right? People of color, different races, ethnicity, all of that also matters. So I think these things are critical, but it's also important to have very exclusive programs as well to show that you care. I think we'll talk about that a little.
All right. So the other question, and I think you touched a little upon that, where you said that you need to have specific goals when you're thinking about your initiatives. So if we can deep dive a little, and if you can help us understand how to measure the success of your initiatives.
Yeah. Measuring success is not easy, and I have to call this out. It isn't easy. In fact, one of the things that we have learned in our journey in diversity and inclusion is, as an organization, even when we started ThoughtWorks 25 years back, the very tenet of being diverse and inclusive was, it is the right thing to do. We started with that as a foundation. It is the right thing to do. You cannot not stay away from being diverse and inclusive. We need to inbuild that into the very fabric of the organization. We started with that. But over the years after that, we realized that there are so many benefits to the business. And unless we talk about both the right thing to do and the value it brings to our business, it'll be very difficult to convince and take everybody along with you on that journey. In fact, in India, in around 2016, we did the gender inclusion study. It's called the gender inclusion study with external facilitators, very senior leaders in the D&I space externally. They came and they did the study for us. And one of the key things they said is, you will need to go beyond talking about why it is the right thing to do to talking about diversity and inclusion, and it's important for the business. And it is important, right? As diverse as we are as a business, global community, we have a diverse set of clients from across the world. If we do not have that diversity internally, we will fail to innovate, right? And hence, that became a very, very critical part of how we talk about diversity and inclusion today. And when we did that study, it wasn't a study that targeted only leaders. We took inputs from people who are on the ground, right? People who work on technology projects, who are developers, business analysts, quality analysts. We took inputs from the next level of leadership, which means that you went to junior, or you went to office level HR people. You spoke to office level leadership. You spoke to people from administration, from marketing, from different functions. And we also took inputs from grads who recently joined us, people who recently joined us. And so, and it covered multiple aspects, right? Right from your recruiting process to your practices, to your, to things like your office setup, all of that. So it covered multiple aspects, and that helped. The other way to measure is, of course, internal surveys. I think it needs to be well thought out. It needs to be anonymous. It needs to be, you need to create a safe space for people to participate, right? And you need to tell people that unless you, and people need to feel that this is important for me because this is something, this is a space I belong, right? At home, we give culture, we give feedback left, right, and center, right? This food is not okay. There's a problem with this. I have a problem with the noise that's there because I'm not able to work, all of that. And I think that feedback is something that we need to give. In fact, I often talk about how we spend more time at work, of course, keeping the pandemic situation outside, that we spend more time at work than we actually do in our with our families. I tell thought workers I spend more time with you all than I did with my kids. Um, and so it's important to collect feedback. I think look at things like pay parity, look at retention, look at data, internal data. Who are you hiring? Look at things like what is the diversity hiring that you are doing, right? What is your pipeline that's there in your diversity, in your recruitment pipeline, right? Look at data like why are people leaving you? What is the reason? There could be multiple reasons that they say, but deeper little deeper into it and dig a little deeper into it. Look at reasons like, are they leaving for pay, or are they leaving because the person was unhappy with the team or the organizational culture? Let each initiative trickle down to teams. Even now in the pandemic, one of the things that we've realized is mental health and wellness is very, very important, right? And we're talking about how people can share, how people can use the EAP program, use external counselors that are available, but still the usage of EAP is very, very less. Why is that so? Why aren't we using this benefit that's offered free, in spite of organizations doing a lot of efforts to bring out the best counselors as part of the program? One of the reasons being is also that there's a lack of personal connect. And we ran an internal thought worker wellness and COVID-19 survey a few I think about 6 weeks back. And one of the feedback that we received was, okay, you're doing office level, you're doing India level, virtual sessions on mental health and wellness, but there are issues in the team as well, right? And you need that personal space to be able to talk about this. And one of the things that we are doing as part of this is we are coming together with something called the Inclusive Teams Deliver Starter Kit. And it is a sort of a team social contract that you can build. So a team says, what are our best practices as a team? If we move out of this team, how do we want to look back and remember this team, right? And then call out some of the things. And this is an online exercise because of the the current situation. But basically, we're asking people to talk about how are we keeping mind of people's schedules? Are we being respectful? Are we thinking about flexibility? Are we keeping people's personal context in mind, right? My personal context is very different, being a mother, having a family, all of that. Your personal context is very different. If you are single and you wake up in the morning, someone's preparing your meals for you, you have it all delivered. Or it must be very different if you are living alone, you have some mental health issues, or you have anxiety issues because of the pandemic, or you have someone in your family who has been affected by COVID. So there are so many aspects of it that you need to keep in mind, and you need to ensure that you follow suit. So this is not rocket science, right? This is something every organization does, but how you do it matters. The personal touch, the effectiveness, the respect, empathy, trying to narrow it down to teams, trying to narrow it down to individuals is what matters. And I think that's what people will remember when they look back at the situation or any issues that you've had. But like I've said, right, practical feedback is also important. Talk to people and ensure you are collecting that data, right? A lot of times there are people, project managers, tech leads, there are people who are probably office level HR people who collect feedback, but they're failing to capture it and share it with the people who are who are building that change within the organization. And so we talk about how it's important to have that cycle where you receive feedback and are able to share that. So multiple things, but doing at least a periodic survey is important to check the pulse, right, of the organization. What do people think about inclusion practices, about hiring practices, about career advancement, about teams, about best practices when it comes to policies, a lot of other things that you can talk about that can be inbuilt into your survey. And then once you get that data, how do you work with that data becomes important. It's very important to also be transparent with that data. Talk about it. Do hold virtual sessions, hold face-to-face sessions if possible and where possible. But talk about this data. Say, hey, this is the data that we got, and this is the areas that we need to improve, and this is how you can participate in that improvement. So making people part of that journey is very, very important to build diversity and inclusion.
All right. So I'll take this opportunity to encourage every participant to ask us as many questions as possible. And towards the end of the session, we'll take some of those questions up. You gave us a glimpse and you told us a little about the initiatives which you have taken in ThoughtWorks. Let's deep dive into that a little more. I'm going to word out the initiatives which you have taken, and if you can help us understand where they started and where you have reached now, and what is your future goal with that initiative.
Sure,
so the first one in our list is the Being Inclusive program.
So I just spoke about it. It's the unconscious bias training program that we customized internally in ThoughtWorks. The entire material was built by us, inputs from global, inputs from a lot of people. And there's a lot of things that we do as part of that. We start off in that 4-hour program talking about why diversity and inclusion is important for us as a business. It includes a video that has our MDs, has me, has a couple of ThoughtWorks leaders talk about why we need to participate in this. It talks about unconscious bias. There are a lot of exercises that go as part of it. There's a lot of sharing, and we start off by saying this is a safe space. What stays in this room stays in this room. And when I put the entire kit of Being Inclusive workshop together, one of the things I did was I collected stories from ThoughtWorks leaders, HR folks, our people team, a lot of other people, but about stories on diversity and inclusion and our practices in the workplace, right from our clients to where things have worked, where things have not worked. So you'll have stories like where a person shares that there was a time when I wanted someone to travel to London from my team for 2 weeks, and there were 2 people who had a business visa, right? It was an important client decision. Both of them were capable, but one was a mother young mother who just came back from a maternity leave, and the other was a guy who who's single. And I went to this guy and I asked him first, thinking that this mother may not be ready to travel because she just came back from a maternity leave and all that. And this guy who he first spoke to, the business analyst, said, I can't travel, my dad is unwell and I need to be here. And then with a lot of hesitation, the person went to this women technologist, and she said, I have my visa stamp, I'm more than happy to go, I have support in the work at home to take care of my daughter, I'm so glad that you asked me. And he was so shaken up by that entire, he said, what is that bias? Why did I hold back? I had the best of intentions in mind, but this is still bias, right? And so these are stories that are part of the whole Being Inclusive workshop that we run. Multiple stories, right? Like there are sometimes you will walk away feeling like it's so enriching to be part of those workshops because there are people sharing so much. And then I quickly sit and capture all these stories when I can. And I will, of course, I will tell people it's anonymous. But these are stories that need to be told because these are stories that are unique to our organization. And unless we share these stories, it'll be like another person spoke about how, when a trans person joined the team, how wary he was, right from asking about how do you address them to calling them for a coffee, and how that journey of learning and how they're the thickest of friends now. So, there are so many stories that are there like that we share. But of course, there's a lot of material that we share before and after the workshop. But this 4-hour workshop is run by ThoughtWorks leadership team. And you sign up, you deliver the workshop, you share your learnings. And so the leaders are held accountable to deliver this. We're growing. It's difficult to do it on an ongoing basis. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we'll continue to do it with the leadership team as long as we can, because it matters when your leaders talk about this.
Yes, absolutely. So the second program we're going to talk about is Interning with Pride. So what is that all about?
So our journey in LGBTQ plus inclusion started very, very long back. I remember when I joined ThoughtWorks, about even 6-7 months later, two of our colleagues, not at the same time, but a little later, but came back and said, I'm talking about 2003-4 then, right? But they came back and said one person was gay, and he said, India is just not a safe space for me, and nor is it a safe space for me from my family, nor friends, nor a society perspective. I need a transfer to the US. And there were two. So awareness, creating that safe space, and as a global organization, there are a lot of best practices that you tend to learn from other regions as well, and other regions learn from you as well. And so we started then, but and when you build that awareness, there are a lot of questions that come up, right? Interning with Pride was the brainchild of two developers in our Hyderabad office. They said, when you can run returnee programs for women, why can't you build internship programs for people from the LGBTQ plus community who are literally non-representative in the tech sector? And that started the journey. And it wasn't easy because nobody's done this before, at least at the scale that we announced it and did it externally in India. And I went through this entire journey of saying no, because every time they came back and presented a plan, I stayed out of the plan for a long time. I said, go back to the drawing board, go back, rework on it. And these two people, Shujan and Archana, were so committed to the program, so committed. And I think it's a shame that I'm talking about it. They should be talking about it. But so invested. And that's the reason, and that's one of the reasons why I talk about empowering your employees to believe that they care and they are participating in this journey of diversity and inclusion. And so it was a 4-month program. We announced it, we called it Interning with Pride. We took a lot of external help in sort of putting it together. Of course, the technical content is something that we built, because keeping our internal expertise and practices in mind. But the 4-month program started, and the thing, right? Like when we had to look at the resumes, a lot of cisgender people who applied. So we had to weed through. So how do you ask the right questions, right? How do you ensure that you are legally also right? So the legal team, the people team, the marketing team, the recruitment team, the D&I team, and then I remember doing the social change interview for all of the 4 people who participated. And then we ran the 4-month program. The Hyderabad office, everybody stayed committed to the program. There were so many people who supported the program, or these 2 people who were working on it and not billing on any other project, which means that they were 2 technical people who could be working on a client project and earning ThoughtWorks dollars, only invested in Interning with Pride for 4 months. All 4 of them were given an option who after the program to join another organization, because it's a certified program. So they had the option of going back home, because there were 2 people from Delhi, but all 4 of them said that he wanted to be part of the Hyderabad office. And so we gave them the offer. Interning with Pride was supposed to happen in 2020 again. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, all the plans were ready. We said we will open it out. We will do it in Bangalore, and we will get people from across locations to come and spend time here. We had budgeted for it, all of that. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it. Now we're talking about Interning with Pride, virtual setup. And hopefully, we should be able to do that in 2021. But this is a program I feel extremely proud about, because I think it offered a platform for thought workers to show that they care.
All right. And it's nice to see that you're innovating and still enabling inclusion. So congratulations for that. Let's jump to the next initiative. And I think this one has gained a lot of traction, which is known as WAPSI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if
In
you can.
fact, the folks who kickstarted interning with Pride questioned us with Vapasi. They said, if you can do Vapasi, why can't you do interning with Pride? um, yeah, Vapasi is, I think, women in tech is an area that we don't shy away from saying is a priority. ThoughtWorks wants to be 40% globally women in tech by 2022. In India, we struggle, right? And not like other regions don't struggle, but in India, we have, when we've done research and we've done studies, we've realized that anywhere between 6 to 10 years, we see a huge percentage of women technologists quitting the workplace, right? A lot of reasons, but one is, starting a family is one of the primary reasons. The other is the trailing spouse, right? Your husband has got a job in another city, you quit and you go, because patriarchy means that's what you do. um, and um, and so we said, how do we tap into this talent? Because internally in ThoughtWorks, we do not let people go. We try our best. Even if someone says we want to quit, we are not able to manage, I'm moving to another city. In fact, that's one of the things I often talk about it, is that there are thought workers who've stayed in another city and worked remotely, where we don't have an office, but we still wanted them to be part of ThoughtWorks, and so we've really worked around that. And there are thought workers who've done that, and not necessarily women. Um, and so that this is our restarter program for women technologists who've taken a break. It is a 4-week program. We offer it for quality analysts. We offer it for developers. We would like, this year the plan was to extend it to business analysts and project managers. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that. We could only do one Vapasi at the beginning of the year. The 4-week program is a very holistic program. It is technology. It is trying to understand how to come back to a workplace and work in teams. So there's project simulation exercise as part of this. Of course, we practice Agile. So understanding the best practices of Agile and how you work in an Agile team. We talk about how you can go find a job outside, how you build your confidence, why diversity and inclusion is important. How do you, how do you promote yourself on social media? How do you create a safe space for yourself? So there are so it's a very holistic, comprehensive program that we do. We've hired, so this program, we do not promise that we will hire everyone who's part of the program, because the intent is not about hiring. The intent is about giving back to the tech community some of the best women who I think have had the misfortune of having a break. And because technology is ever changing, it's very difficult for them to come and restart their careers. Proud to say that a lot of other organizations have asked us about how we develop this program and started their own programs, using this as a foundational program. Vapasi is very dear to my heart, being a mother myself, but fortunate enough that, I've been part of ThoughtWorks and I didn't really have to worry too much. But I know that that it is so difficult outside, especially for women technologists. It's easier in non-tech roles, but it's very difficult in certain roles, especially in technology roles. And so this is important to us. We've hired a lot of people through the program, and the trainers are 90% thought workers. So, they understand why this is important. We have a governance group that includes people who are ex-Vapasi folks, the D&I team, recruitment team, employer brand team, women technologists, thought worker leaders, all of that, who part of this governance group, who constantly look at the best practices, right from how we promote Vapasi to the curriculum, to some of the best practices. So after the 4-week program, some of them are offered internship with ThoughtWorks. The others are given a certificate, and many of them have gone on to find jobs in other organizations. Being leaders in the technology industry, that certificate is extremely valuable when you take it outside. And hence, this is something that we do. After that, you can't just, 4 weeks are not enough to just be confident and say, I can be part of a technology team. And so we ease them into the system. So we offer them internship for anywhere between 3 to 6 months, and with some clauses, right? Because while we will support you, you need to ensure that you empower yourself, you invest in yourself. And this is not something that is, this is where your merit comes in place, right? You need to show, we will support you through this, but now you need to show that you are capable of contributing effectively to these teams. And hence that holistic effort in supporting you. And then and then they're offered mentors, they're offered sponsors in their team. All of us in the DNI team are available for them to, to reach out to. So multiple aspects that we look at, no program, and I constantly say this, just having a restarter program, just having a hiring campaign is not enough. You need to look at it 360 degrees about how you're going to include them into every aspect of your organization, from your policies to your teams. In fact, the teams, the team lead, the project managers are spoken to and supported and told that this is the journey the person has gone through and this is the support they will need. And so it's never about just doing a program and this, then, just having them in teams. It's much more than that. But very, very dear. One of the bases for winning the NASSCOM Gender Inclusion Award for 2019 was a WAPASI program itself. And a lot of us hold it very dear to our heart.
All right. So the hashtag, which again gained a lot of traction, hashtag Talk Tech to Her, is under WAPSI? Is it part of the same initiative?
Talk Tech to Her is a campaign that we started about many, many years back, right? And the tagline is trying to change the tech industry one women technologist at a time. And the campaign aims at technologists with more than 6+ years of experience, and we want to celebrate women. We want to celebrate women technologists. We want to say that we care. We want to show that you are a role model and a leader in the organization. And so the entire campaign is in tune towards that. So there are a lot of programs. So WAPASI is one program under that. There are a lot of other initiatives that we do under the Women Technologist program that are part of this effort.
All right. So, and the last initiative, which I'm going to talk about, which I found quite interesting and quite innovative, is the Humanitarian Software Program. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I often talk about and is that, it's not just diversity and inclusion, but it is, social change is interwoven into the organization. And I spoke about, in fact, me along with my colleague Satish, we represent social change for India, and I also, take care of diversity and inclusion. And this particular team, and we are a group that represents all of the 22 regions, locations that we come from. And this team looks at 5 areas of focus under the social change area. And one is a personal journey of a thought worker. How does a thought worker understand inequities that are there in the world, understands one's own privilege, understands the communities in their regions and across the world. So how do we go on that personal journey is one. How do we create a space of learning? The next is championing diversity and inclusion. So that is one area of focus. There is equitable tech, which is technology and the role that technology can play in building equity, right, is another area of focus. There is solidarity over charity. So how do you, CSR, of course, is mandatory in India, but not in all other countries and regions. But how do you look beyond just charity and how do you support movements who are working towards the right causes, right? So you will have a lot of thought workers, ThoughtWorks regions contribute to projects in the social change space. There are a lot of, like for example, when the Black Lives Matter movement started, the George Floyd death, we started working with the Invisible Institute many years before that in the US, North America. And like this, right? Like we worked with Beswada Wilson's organization. We've helped build their website. We helped build technology support for Solidarity Foundation, an LGBTQ+ inclusion nonprofit. So we do believe that technology has a role to play in building equity, and solidarity over charity means that how do we support and give a voice to these external, areas. And so humanitarian software program and tech for good is another area of focus for us under that. And the humanitarian software program is a program where we've said, how can we as a technology company use our expertise to support to support organizations in the humanitarian space. And we worked with multiple organizations under this program. In fact, one of the things that we are currently working on is the Bamni COVID project. Bamni is a HMS, right? The hospital management system app product that we have built by the ThoughtWorks has built and now is open sourced and is part of a coalition. The coalition owns the thing product. But during this time, how do we ensure that we create a platform for, marginalized communities to have access to or better access to healthcare products? And how do organizations working for these marginalized communities have some of the systems in place that some of the privileged private hospitals have, right? So hospital management systems and patient management information systems, all of this is something that Bamni offers, which is a software. And so we have ThoughtWorkers working and contributing to that. So there are some that are doing it voluntarily, but ThoughtWorks has also invested some technology support that comes from our side as well.
All right. So it's time to take up a few questions. Again, I would like to encourage everybody to post their questions. So because we've come to the session where we're just going to concentrate purely on your questions. So the first question for the evening is, how inclusive policies can be adopted in startup ecosystem?
I think that's the best place to start. When I joined ThoughtWorks India, and we were just 13 people. I was the 13th person to join, and part of the seeding team in a sense. And I think that the way you can mold the organizational culture, create a sense of belonging, ownership, transparency, build the right policies, can start from there. And like I said, that when you make people custodians of the organizational culture and make diversity and inclusion their prerogative and their their responsibility, the right place to start. I also think that in a startup culture, you have the space to also be able to take the best practices from the industry, and to be able to customize that to your organization, and also build on it, right? And then also look at flexibility, because very important, right? Sometimes in the startup culture, one of the things that are extremely challenging is flexibility, because people, of course, there's a lot of ownership everyone have to the product or any that you're building. But talk about flexibility, hire diversity hiring becomes important there. A lot of times when you're in a startup mode and you have funding and you are in a hire to hire people, and you want to hire the best in the industry, and you are offering fancy salary packages, please keep diversity in mind. Please hire a diverse set of people. If you hire the same set of people, you are going to create a bro culture. You are going to create a culture that will adversely impact your organization in the long run. So think about diversity from day one, especially in a startup culture. Ensure that your leadership understands it. If you do not have leaders who want to invest in D&I, talk about the business benefits of diversity and inclusion in your business context. I always talk about this when I talk externally. I say, in the context of your business, talk about why it is important, right? And I think it's an awesome place to start. It's very difficult when you're 2000, you have 2000 employees across the globe, and say, we want to start an ERG, I want to do this. It's easier to do it when you're in a startup mode.
There's a follow-up question posted by one of the attendees, and I think you've already answered it, but I'm going to read it out anyhow. Would you be able to highlight some of the initiatives to begin with? So I think you already touched upon this.
Recruiting, yes. Look at your pipeline. Talk to any consulting company you are working with. Start by talking about what is the value of your startup. What are the values you all are going to live by as an organization? Is diversity and inclusion as part of that, right? Do you all care about what is community related support that you all want to do, right? How important is integrity? How important is inclusion? How important is what are some of the things that form the DNA, form the very fabric of your organization? Talk about that. Talk about it in the context of the country you are part of, right? You don't adopt something that is tailor made from the US or the UK because some head office, some funder sits there. Talk about it in the context of the Indian culture, and do that. When you go to when you go and hire grads, talk about the importance of have it as part of your onboarding practices. Have it as part of your leadership development programs. Have it as part of your fun initiatives, right? Like in ThoughtWorks, we do something called the Away Day. Once a year, it's become expensive to do it once a year, but we all come together in one location for a long weekend. And we talk about business, we talk about, we invite external speakers, we talk about social and economic justice topics, we talk about diversity and inclusion. We have fun as a community, we come together, collaborate, and talk about our successes, our failures, and this is, so find opportunities to talk about these things. Learn as a community. Have, like there are communities in ThoughtWorks where we talk about, like there is one group that talks about, you have activities like the human library, right? Or you can do something like pick up a certain issue. Talk about reservations, right? A lot of people have a lot of issues about reservations. What are the perils? What are some of the benefits of reservations? Talk about caste system. Talk about, take something that's happened in our country. Talk about the migrant issues that the country is facing, and then try and dissect that. Talk about, like for example, right? Right now, every year, the housekeeping staff kids' education is funded by ThoughtWorkers. Happens very simply, right? Some office started it, trickled to other offices, said this is important. Every Diwali, all of the housekeeping staff, no matter what because they are not our employees, they're a contract company, right? But these things are important. So being able to creating that sense of empowerment in for all of you all, especially in a startup community, becomes important. Look at all of the practices. Hiring, look at your inclusion best practices, look at your policies, look at advancement related and equal opportunities, look at pay parity, look at all of these aspects, and then there's a lot of sessions like this that you can also participate in and learn from as well.
All right. Another question coming your way, Tina. Does ThoughtWorks have any program focusing on veterans inclusion?
No, we don't. We don't. And that is something, like I said in the beginning, right? There are some areas of focus that we care deeply about. Like, for example, even people with disability, right? That's something that we are digging deeper into, and we're having conversations about. Accessibility, the restrooms, all that is fine. But some of our practices, right, agile practices, are high in communication and collaboration. And so not everyone with a disability can participate and be part of it. And these are conversations that, it's not like we're not having conversations. Of course, we build accessible software. Our website, is accessible for people with disability. All of that is there. But are we actively hiring? No. Are we actively hiring women in technology? Yes. Are we actively looking at creating a safe space for all? Yes. Are we actively saying, but do we say no to people with disability when they want to be part of ThoughtWorks? No. But are we saying, I'm doing an exclusive campaign to hire people with disability? I'll have to say no. But have people with disability approached us? Are we learning as a community? Are we learning from external organizations? Yes. Did we start on our LGBTQ plus inclusion journey a little later than gender? Of course we did. So I think it's okay, but it is not something that you say that you will not do. This is something that we will continue to do and continue to learn, which is why it's always a journey and never a state.
Right. So the next question, how do you know business outcomes have improved because of D&I initiatives? Have you done anything to especially measure the alignment?
I think definitely, right. I can give you a very old example. Um, many years back, when we were working with a humanitarian organization, and there were these two ladies who were our clients, and they basically wanted to build an app for women to track their menstrual cycles, because family planning is a challenge for in some remote locations, right? Like women don't are not empowered to make those decisions. So how do women track their their safe period, their unsafe period, things like that? And of course, as always, there is a staffing decision that gets made, who is going to meet the clients. And the two women walked into a room, the two clients, into a room full of men, and we were talking about menstruation, period cycle, all of that. And that sort of, and then and they were very, I mean, the safe space that we offer, men can talk very easily about all of this, but then you need women to talk about menstrual cycle, to talk, because this is the experience, and it is the same for every technology that you use today, right? Every technology that we have has a diverse set of people um, using it. And so we will fail as a business if we are not reflective of the diversity that's there outside, because we will fail to cater to that diverse set of people who are using our products, using our services, using our whatever we develop, right? And the services that we offer. But what I have seen is that when we have diverse teams, we have seen a lot more collaboration, a lot more empathy within teams, a lot more understanding. And these are things that have come out in individual conversations, in surveys. In fact, there are people who come back and said, this is an all women team, or there are too many men in this team, we need more diversity. And these are not only women who point this out, everybody points this out. And LGBTQ plus inclusion, right? Like everyone knows the value, the pink money, right? If you do not build products that caters to everybody within externally, then it's going to be very difficult to succeed as a business. Innovation thrives on diversity, right? And so some things are measurable, some things are not, but at least in the tech industry, we've seen that it definitely plays a role, right? Our clients ask for diversity. I have to tell you all this. There are so many clients who said, you all have spoken so much about gender diversity, but we've had only men come and meet us so far. We recently built a product for an airport, and this was an app for people who are travelers to use. And so our MD had gone there with a set of people from the technology and business team, and so the CEO of the company said, where are the 20 plus people, 20 plus year olds who will be using this product? It's not you 50, 60 plus people, 55-year-olds who are going to be using a product. So where is the diversity, right? And so Sudhir, who's our MD, said, we come with 20 plus years of experience. That's not what we want, was what the client said. So you need diversity, you need generational diversity, you need gender diversity, you need diversity in terms of backgrounds, in terms of identities, in terms of a lot of other things. And you're very right when you say veteran diversity. And that is an area that we definitely are discussing, multiple areas, right? Across locations, across countries. And we're learning as a community, both internally and externally.
All right. So before we jump to the last question for the evening, I would like to tell everybody that this session will be available on Inclusify's YouTube channel. So be sure to follow us there. Also, we come up with interesting topics, and we're going to bring more D&I leaders in the forefront, and we're going to have interesting discussions like this one. So be sure to follow us on our social media handles. In fact, we would be very happy to connect with you and have a dialogue with you. So you can even write to us directly on our email ID, hello@inclusify.io, and yeah, let's get connected. So the last question for the evening, and the most interesting one, Tina, is what is the best part of being a D&I leader?
Oh my God. um, for me personally, and I'll talk about, you know, and I often talk about this, is that I have found my calling in D&I. I played multiple roles. I've been, part of operations teams. I've played global roles. I've done employer brand marketing. I have I've, worked on building leadership, learning and development programs internally. Um, but there is a sense of purpose that is there when you are in diversity and inclusion, and there's so much to learn in this space that you're constantly on that learning journey. There's never a time when I feel like I've learned enough, even when it comes to certain sections where I feel like, okay, maybe I've learned enough, but I still feel there's so much more to learn. And this is, I think that's the best part of being this. It's so purpose filled, right? Every day you walk away say feeling good about it, feeling good about impacting someone, about being there for someone, about bringing about change in somebody's life, in an organization, in a team. And I think that is very, very fulfilling. You also get to understand the lived experiences of a lot of people, right? And that is very enriching when you start putting together some of these experiences into policies and practices and programs and campaigns. And that has been extremely useful and insightful to me. From my personal side, I think my children are a lot more sensitive to a lot of these issues externally. A lot of times they'll say, "Ma, that's being judgmental, ma." Or they say, "Ma, look, let's watch this movie, or let's do this. This is about LGBTQ plus inclusion." I've had my children come for, Pride walks. I've often talk about what is gender equity on the dining table, right? Like my daughter tells me, "Ma, why are men called head of the family and not women? Women are the ones who give birth to children, so women should be the head of the family." And because some of our textbooks are so old school, right? They talk about even today there are some ICSE textbooks that a father goes to office, mother cooks at home, which is and so being able to I come from a Catholic family, and LGBTQ plus inclusion is not something we speak about. A lot of times not very acceptable, especially to people from the older generation, because but in my journey on LGBTQ plus inclusion, I have taken my entire family along with me. And I feel very, very proud of that. So it just manifests itself in so many ways in your personal life and professional life, and the way you influence others as well, right? So, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I don't make mistakes. I am judgmental. I do a lot of things that I think I should correct myself on. But I think I've started on that journey, and I think anyone who cares about the diversity and inclusion space and the equity space will feel that privilege. It is a privilege to be able to understand the space, and I feel extremely privileged to have had that opportunity.
So thank you, Tina, for giving us the time and opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you for sharing all the insights and taking us through ThoughtWorks program. I would also like to thank all the participants for being a very interactive audience, and that is what made this session a successful one. So Tina, we'll see you again towards the end of the month in the panel discussion, and it's going to be an interesting one. So do stay tuned. All right, with that.
Thanks everyone. Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.